doesn't here in town who have opted for maths at the UT level. Why is it? Why is it so? You see, it goes without saying that mathematics has to be distinguished from other intellectual disciplines in many ways. You see, it takes a lot of effort and hard work to come to grips with any other discipline, any other subject, be it physics, chemistry, history, humanities, psychology, philosophy. So you need an effort. But the kind of effort that is brought to bear upon in an effort to understand maths is of a different genre, it's of a different kind. And that particular genre of effort is missing. Now, what is that exactly? You see, there is something very unique with mathematics. There are many things, but one thing is very unique that doesn't happen elsewhere. I mean, the other day I was interacting with some colleagues in a similar occasion. You see, we come across this word math phobia, right? It's very common. Have you ever heard of physics phobia, English phobia, history phobia? We haven't. It may have its own share of difficulty to comprehend, that apart. But math phobia is something very peculiar, very typical to mathematics. And why does it come about in the first place? Why do we come across this math phobia in mathematics, not elsewhere? The reason is one single sentence. Mathematics has an organic unity that's not witnessed elsewhere. Now, what does that mean? You see, in order to make sense of a certain passage of mathematics or certain portion of mathematics, we have to have a certain background. That happens across the board in all disciplines. But what is so special about mathematics? You see, let's say even in physics, which is the next cousin, the first cousin of mathematics, you also come across such difficulties, but not that extent. You see, if a student, for example, in a class of economics, fails to show up in a particular class or chooses to bunk it, there's a certain amount of economics that is supposed to be taught to him and he has missed it. Maybe it's the next day too, and third day he shows up in the class. So there is a gap. The content that was taught to him, he has missed it. So the next talk, the next lecture would be based upon what was taught to him in the past couple of periods, right? Now, to what extent will he be able to comprehend the content after he has bunked the class the previous day? Even if he has not tried to compensate for the loss, I mean, if he is diligent, he is good, he would inquire from his friends in the class, "Kal kya padhaya gaya tha?" So he will just sit down and try to understand the material so that the next day he doesn't have to come across difficulties. But even if he were not to do it, he can broadly make sense. I mean, that happens in life sciences, that happens in sciences across the board. For example, if you are doing, say, solid state physics, condensed matter physics, it's always good to know classical mechanics of Newton. But if you don't know it to the extent that it is supposed to be known, you will still understand it reasonably well. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen in mathematics. It's very pathetic. You see, pick up this the first course, our first encounter with geometry, that happens in the 8th, 9th class. And when we do this using geometry, Pythagoras have congruent triangles, how to measure the area or this of a circle or of a sector. If the student doesn't know it, and then In basic final, he is taught the idea of a major. Major is, roughly speaking, a generalization of area and volume, right? किस हद तक उसकी समझ आती है? And you know it happens right from his high school days, from his school days. So he will have to struggle. Now somehow, let's assume, which happens for the most part, that he is not hardworking enough to collect the material and try to make himself aware of all these things. How much do you expect the teacher to go out of his way to make the content available? So teacher can do to a certain extent, but the student also has to. However, here comes the main thing. At the school level, the onus falls mainly upon the teacher. I'm talking now specifically about mathematics. The onus falls upon the teacher to make the content comprehensible. Why? Because student in the school, at the school level, is not mature enough, doesn't have that maturity of thought that you expect an undergrad college student or university student. So if he doesn't know what parallel lines mean, what does it mean to say the angles of a triangle add up to 180? It is up to the teacher, it's for the teacher to sit down with him and try to make him understand this stuff. 80% of the onus in my assessment falls upon the teacher at the school level. Teacher has to really work hard. Now, unfortunately, we are all sailing in the same boat. I'm not being personal. Please take it in its right simply. The system of recruitment, of appointment of teachers across the school, college level is faulty. But it is tragically faulty in case of the schools, in general, for the most part. Teacher is not motivated enough to understand the material himself or herself and then communicate with the students. If he has to teach for 1 hour in a class, he has to have the material at least for 3 hours. He should have mastered that material. He should know more than he is supposed to teach. A teacher by definition is supposed to know much more than he is supposed to teach in class. And this doesn't happen only to school teachers, it happens to teachers at all levels. So he is not motivated enough. That is the problem. So it is this that leads to math phobia. Now why? Student has missed out, say, on this quantum of let's say geometry, where he is asked to draw a tangent to a circle from a point outside of it. The best I have seen our students and even our teachers. I have seen teachers, how do they explain it? I was watching it from an invisible corner of the class in some school. So what he did, he drew a circle and put a point outside it. Then he picked up a ruler from the student. उससे कहा देखो ये इसके साथ जोड़ दो ऐसे थोड़ा सा खिसका दो और लाइन ड्रा करो, ये हो गया टेंजेंट. Nothing wrong on the face of it. But there is a whole lot of idea, a deep idea involved in it. You have to be geometrically able to locate that point on the circle so that when you join them by a pencil and the ruler, that will be a tangent. And that is to prove that it's actually a tangent. The tangent थोड़ी है कि tangentially pass हो रहा है, as we say. It's not that way. So teacher doesn't put due diligence because he is not motivated. So recruitment policy, unfortunately, the main cogs in the policy system who were expected to be, present today, they are not around. So they need to think about these things. They need to revise the policy. It is terribly faulty. Terribly faulty, I can't tell you. This is a disaster in progress. It has been happening for the last 40, 50 years now. Earlier on, things were much better. For example, when I was a school-going kid, we had fantastic teachers. We had that ability. I asked a question of a teacher and he held me by my wrist, told me to follow him. He took me to his office, his room, and then explained for about 2 hours. He said, why I took you to the class? Because other students were not perhaps interested in this stuff. It's a very good question, so it has a very good answer. Let me explain. And that made me fall in love with science. I said, okay, this is what's happening. So the teacher has to be available. Teacher has to be available. He has to do the extra work. And when you go up the ladder, you go to the college level, the role of a teacher is definitely there. It's very much there. You do not have to rule it out. But I put it as, it's not random. I have thought about it, done some analysis also. It has to be 50-50. The teacher and the student have to be equally involved in the process of learning. They have to be equally involved. Because at that stage, student is much more mature than he was at his school level. He knows some geometry, some algebra, how to solve quadratics, biquadratics, cubics. At the school level, he was just a kid. He was not even in his teens. Like say, okay, in his early teens. So that's what happens. At the master's level, the student is exposed to much more mathematics. So therefore, he doesn't need that much attention from the teacher as in the previous stages. So here I would say the role of a teacher is something like 20-25%. The rest is the student who has to do it. And this I have myself experienced as a student. So math phobia, if you want to arrest it, the student will naturally run away. See, he is seeing equations being displayed on the blackboard when he has not understood what was done previously. Or even if he was a regular in the class, he was not made to understand what is this. What does a quadratic equation actually entail? What does it mean? You have this, for example, how many of us go out of our way to tell the student that pi is actually this? Not the number pi. क्या है जी ये 22/7 generally it's about 95%, 99%. ऐसी जवाब है. Whatever it is, it's an approximate value. But what is it actually? How do we define it? We have to at least settle for the following statement, which unfortunately is not forthcoming from most of us who are teaching the schools. It is the ratio of the circumference of the circle to the diameter. Now here comes the question, which the student, a good student, has to ask. But if he doesn't, don't blame him. He is too immature to ask the question. The teacher has to tell him, बेटा आपने ये कहा कि ये सर्कल, मैं कोई बड़ा सर्कल लेता हूँ या बहुत ही छोटा, and I take this circumference and divide it by the radius. The diameter. Couldn't it be less or more? When he tells him, it means the same for all the circles. It will provoke his interest. Student का interest इससे provoke. अच्छा ऐसा होता है. There are infinitely many circles, and they share this property. You may perhaps withhold the truth, though it's not a big ask to tell him to do at the high school level. He can do it. Inscribe polygons and do all that. The thing is, this has to be told. अब जैसे इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज में मैथ कैसे पढ़ाई जाती है, उससे भी गया दूसरा स्कूल्स में पढ़ाया जाता है. The kind of the way maths is being taught to the engineering students is, well, this is the formula, plug in the values and get the answer. So things don't happen that way. Mathematics is not formulas. It's not computations. It's not algorithms. It's not theorems or lemmas. It is understanding. You see, I am reminded of those three pearls of wisdom by three great thinkers of all time. About learning. What's learning? Like Whitney says somewhere that intelligence does not consist in the ease of memorizing, but in understanding what's learned. It doesn't consist in the ease of learning or memorizing. It consists in the understanding of what's learned. And then there is another very famous quote, I quote it, ad nauseam. Saying much, struggling much, and studying much. These are the three pillars of learning. Actually, there's nothing like a free lunch. देखिए ये जो इंटरनेट टेक्नोलॉजी चल पड़ी है, क्या पड़ी है, अब चैट जीपीटी चल पड़ा है. इंटरनेट हैज बीन देयर फॉर अबाउट 50 years नाउ. इसके कितने फायदे हैं भी नो इट, इसके नुकसान भी हैं. जो होना ही चाहिए. अभी देयर इज ऑलवेज अ फ्लिप साइड टू इट. इट हैज फैसिलिटेटेड आवर लाइफ, नोबडी इज गोइंग टू डिस्प्यूट दैट. लेकिन देखिए क्या होता है, खासकर स्कूल कॉलेज लेवल या यूनिवर्सिटी लेवल. I mean, for the teachers. देखिए मेरे साथ क्या होता है, I will tell you my own experience. I always prefer to do things manually. I am not tech savvy and perhaps I don't want to be tech savvy. मैं बहुत ही गड़बड़ हूँ इस मामले में. I don't handle things the way they are supposed to, because there is no will to learn more. So you want to work it out that gives you joy and pleasure, no doubt. Now there is something that keeps bothering you for a long time. You think about it, you don't get it. But if after a lot of effort you are able to resolve it, the magnitude of pleasure would be that much more considerable, isn't it? So abhi recently I was not able to fix a certain issue in a certain problem. So I felt bad about myself. I said, this I should be able to sort out. So there is a friend and he is using a lot of chat. And he is trying to, prod me into learning it. He is trying to provoke me into learning it. I said, nothing good. But he has been very productive since he took to chat. He writes 90 to 100. Lots of papers. Well, I don't envy that. Go to show this. He tells me, साहब आप इस वजह से परेशान हैं, ये प्रॉब्लम आपको सिखा रही है, तो कैन यू टेल मी द प्रॉब्लम. I said नहीं, I will work it out. तो कह रहे कि प्लीज बता दीजिए, I will tell you how great it is chat. But he said you formulate it precisely, which I did. The next day he sends me a PDF file for 4 pages, and when I look at it, the solution puzzles me, and the solution is correct. And I was relieved but not terribly happy because I didn't do it myself. तो मैंने कहा ये आइडिया मुझे आना चाहिए था, थोड़ा सा क्या ठीक ठाक मुझे इस पे तकलीफ हुई. मैंने कहा this was not a great idea, but somehow it was subtle, too subtle for me to have struck my mind. अब ये फायदा है या नुकसान है, बताइए. नुकसान. मैं इसको नुकसान ही देखता हूँ. ठीक है, मेरा टाइम बच गया. I would save my blushes by wasting further time on this. वो मिल गया, ठीक है. लेकिन मैंने कहा कि ये तो ठीक नहीं हुआ. Perhaps if I had strived still harder, I would have been able to do it maybe in the next couple of days. तो मसला ये है कि there is always a temptation to go to ChatGPT, go to AI and find the answers. That's what our kids do. तो उनका ये जो है ना, it remains packed, बिल्कुल wrapped in mind. So therefore, you don't grow up. You see, a thing, if it is in disuse, will lose its value, its validity, its precious. तो यही जो है ह्यूमन माइंड के साथ भी है. So ये जो टेंडेंसी हो जाती है, वो क्यों ना हो, it is very human. You see, you want to save your time and watch a cricket match or go playing or whatever. लेकिन it takes its own price. तो ये दिक्कत हो गई. अब जैसे ये कहा जा रहा है कि ChatGPT और AI ने जो है रेवोल्यूशनाइज कर दिया बेशक. I mean, the speed with which we can communicate is definitely fabulous. But the thing is, it takes its own price. So the point is, nothing can replace the personal face-to-face interaction between the student and the teacher. Nothing can replace it. Even if there are big strides, further strides in AI ChatGPT, uska koi mutbadil ho nahi sakta. So, I mean, we have to perhaps get our act together, sit down with the students. I mean, it's such a pleasure to talk to someone who knows better and want to learn from that person. It is very rewarding both for the taught as well as the teacher. So, math phobia, that is the reason for the decline. Let me tell you. One single, please challenge me. This is the reason. और उसके लिए क्या है? हमारा एजुकेशन सिस्टम फॉल्टी, टेरिबली फॉल्टी. और उसका क्या है? फर्दर रीजन, दैट इज टीचिंग, poor quality of teaching. So, in a nutshell, it is teaching. If we improve it, our education system will be improved, and that more math phobia would be gone, and our students will be sufficiently motivated to take up mathematics. Zabardasti nahi karni. I mean, we want to popularize mathematics. I mean, what kind of a slogan? To popularize, it's not a sport. I mean, it has to appeal to the individual temperament of the student, who apni jagah hai. But we can also inculcate a love for mathematics by being good teachers. So that is what is lacking. And this is an activity which JKIMS is mandated to include it as a regular part of this activity, to reach out to the teachers. Sometimes we go there, sometimes they come here, like it has happened today. So this interaction has to go on. I have to cut it short, unfortunately, so the rest we will talk about in the next talk. Thank you very much for your listening.